The Krummlauf, curved barrel gun. The Nazis decided that shooting around corners was a totally reasonable idea. The Krummlauf, which literally translates to curved barrel, because at least they were honest about it, was an attachment for German rifles that bent the barrel at either 30 or 90 degrees. Soldiers used mirrors and periscope devices to aim, which should tell you everything about how well this worked. In theory, your enemy would never see you coming. In reality, the Germans would have been better off just blind firing around a corner and hoping for the best. The bent barrel shredded bullets into pieces, destroying any hope of accuracy. The gas pressure inside the barrel put massive stress on the bend, and even with vent holes added to compensate, the Krummlauf lasted only a few hundred rounds before it literally fell apart. Not exactly the game changer they were hoping for. The Maus tank. You'd think a tank called the Maus, German for mouse, would be small and nimble. You'd be wrong. Either the Nazi engineers had a twisted sense of irony, or they just ran out of intimidating animal names. Originally supposed to be called the Mammoth or Mammoth, this super heavy tank was designed to be an unstoppable death machine. Instead, it became a 188-ton paperweight. Designed by Ferdinand Porsche, yes, that Porsche, the Maus, was plagued with problems from day one. It could barely hit 12 miles per hour, which makes perfect sense when you remember it weighed 188 tons. Bridges couldn't support it. Quick advances? Forget it. Hasty retreats? Not happening. The thing was so heavy and slow it was basically a sitting duck for enemy artillery. Production started in 1943, but Allied bombing destroyed the facilities where its blueprints were kept. Only 2 prototypes were ever completed in late 1944. The Soviets blew them both up in 1945 and hauled the wreckage back home for examination. Hitler's obsession with bigger and heavier tanks had officially jumped the shark. The Windkanone, wind cannon. When conventional weapons weren't cutting it, Germany decided to get creative with what they called Wunderwaffen, wonder weapons. And boy, did they get weird. Enter the Windkanone, a cannon that weaponized wind. Yes, wind. Austrian scientist Mario Zippermeyer built a massive 32-foot barrel designed to fire a vortex of heated nitrogen and oxygen at enemy aircraft. The idea was to literally blow planes out of the sky with a blast of superheated air. It sounds like something a cartoon supervillain would dream up, and it performed exactly as well as you'd expect. The cannon was huge, expensive, and time-consuming to build. When they finally set it up on a bridge over the Elbe River for testing, it proved completely incapable of reaching the altitude of Allied planes. Zippermeyer had successfully broken wooden boards at close range in earlier tests, but apparently nobody considered that planes fly a bit higher than wooden boards. The wind cannon was officially a bust. The Schwerer Gustav railway gun. Back in the mid-1930s, Hitler decided he wanted a ridiculously big gun to break through France's Maginot Line. The Krupp Armaments Company took this request and ran with it, creating what can only be described as a regular gun scaled up to absurd proportions, the Schwerer Gustav railway gun. And yes, it was literally a gun mounted on train tracks. This thing weighed 1,350 metric tons and could fire a 7-ton shell up to 29 miles. The barrel alone was 106 feet long. It took forever to build because every component had to be custom manufactured, and it wasn't ready for its first test fire until August 1941. When it finally saw combat in 1942, the soldiers nicknamed it Dora, cute name for a weapon of mass destruction. Dora unleashed hell on the Soviet city of Sevastopol, which must have been absolutely terrifying. But after firing just 47 rounds, the barrel wore out completely. This gigantic, unwieldy cannon required hundreds of soldiers to operate, took weeks to set up, and could barely fire 50 shots before it needed major repairs. And here's the kicker, Hitler didn't even need it. The Nazis just walked around the Maginot Line instead of blasting through it. The Maginot Line. Speaking of the Maginot Line, let's talk about France's billion-dollar mistake. Built in the 1,930 seconds to keep the land-hungry Nazis out, this defensive fortification stretched over 280 miles and was packed with munitions, steel-reinforced concrete, minefields, and underground fortresses, complete with hospitals and barracks. It cost what would be billions of dollars today and was considered one of the most advanced fortifications of its time. There was just one tiny problem. The designers put way too much faith in the stopping power of trees. The Maginot Line essentially ended at the Belgian border because the French assumed the wooded Ardennes forest was impassable for tanks. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. The Nazis simply drove around it, with over 1 million soldiers, tanks, and aircraft support, waltzing into France like they owned the place. After spending a fortune building this supposedly impenetrable wall, the French discovered they'd basically constructed the world's most expensive speed bump. The Germans didn't even need to break through it, they just took a detour. The Cultivator No. 6 Nelly, the trench digger. World War I was all about trenches. World War II? Not so much. But apparently, Winston Churchill didn't get the memo. He commissioned the Cultivator No. 6, affectionately nicknamed Nelly, a massive machine that was basically a tank designed to dig trenches while soldiers followed safely behind. The British government approved production of both narrow and wide versions and originally planned to power them with airplane engines. But then reality kicked in. The airplane engines were scrapped in favor of diesel to free them up for actual fighter planes. Planes that could actually impact the war. Manufacturing delays, supply issues, and shifting battlefronts complicated everything. And here's the real problem. Aerial assaults don't really care about trenches. Bombs dropped from planes aren't exactly stopped by holes in the ground. Out of the 200 machines commissioned, only 10 were ever built, and not a single one saw combat. Churchill's trench-digging dream died before it could dig its first trench. The Smith gun. After the Dunkirk evacuation in 1940, British forces had to abandon tons of weapons on European beaches. With the country suddenly short on firepower, engineer William Smith came up with a quick solution that would eventually bear his name and his embarrassment. The Smith gun was essentially a large tube with 2 wheels that could be towed behind a civilian vehicle. When it was time to fight, soldiers would tip it up onto one wheel while the center section revealed the gun. The wheel above provided some cover for the operator. On paper, it sounded practical. In reality, it was a disaster. The gun was notoriously inaccurate, which is already a bad start for a weapon. But it gets worse. Many of the shells came with poorly made fuses, leading Home Guard commanders to worry that the Smith gun was more dangerous to the person firing it than to the enemy. Wounding your own soldiers isn't exactly a winning strategy. About 10,500 were produced, and surprisingly, some Home Guard personnel actually grew fond of the clunky contraption, probably Stockholm Syndrome. The Kaiten, human torpedoes, Japan's kamikaze aircraft, are infamous, but their suicide weapon program didn't stop at planes. Meet the Kaiten human-piloted torpedoes that took desperation to a whole new level. The concept was simple in the most horrifying way possible. Stick a person inside a torpedo to improve its guidance system. Sailors were essentially sent on one-way missions, piloting these underwater death traps toward enemy ships. During testing alone, at least 15 pilots died before the Kaiten ever saw combat. The program launched in late 1944, and while it did cause real damage, sinking 2 U.S. ships and killing 187 Allied personnel, the cost to Japan was far greater. Many more Japanese sailors died in the program than enemies killed. And just like the kamikaze planes, accuracy was a massive problem. These torpedoes often missed their targets entirely. When your weapon's biggest flaw is that it kills more of your own people than the enemy, you've officially failed at warfare. The Panjandrum rolling bomb. The British Panjandrum looked like something you'd see at a carnival, not a battlefield. And that's only the second most ridiculous thing about it. The first? It straight up didn't work. Engineer Neville Shute Norway designed this weapon to help Allied forces breach the concrete seawalls Germany was building along the Atlantic coast. The concept was a giant wheel bomb, 2 massive wheels connected by an axle, with rockets attached to the wheels for propulsion and a 1-ton explosive charge in the center. In theory, it would roll toward enemy fortifications, detonate, and clear the way for Allied troops. During a public test on a beach, military officials and observers quickly learned that controlling a rocket-powered bomb on wheels is harder than it sounds. The rockets kept firing off course, sending the Panjandrum spinning wildly in random directions. Observers and military brass literally had to dive for cover as this runaway death wheel careened around the beach. A weapon you can't aim and that actively tries to kill your own people isn't exactly battlefield ready. The project was scrapped immediately. Good call. The bat bomb. We've covered a lot of international embarrassments, but we saved the absolute dumbest for last. And yes, it's America's contribution. Meet the bat bomb. This wasn't some military general's brainchild. It came from Dr. Lytle S. Adams, a well-connected dental surgeon who happened to be friends with Eleanor Roosevelt. Adams pitched the First Lady on an idea. Strap tiny incendiary bombs to bats, drop them over Japanese cities, and let nature do the rest. The bats would roost in buildings, the bombs would detonate, and fires would spread everywhere. In his letter, Adams literally called bats the lowest form of animal life. Bold words from a dentist trying to convince the military to weaponize flying mammals. Surprisingly, Roosevelt thought it had potential. Meetings were held. Research was conducted. And in 1943, U.S. soldiers found themselves with the strangest assignment of the war, collecting bats from Carlsbad caverns and strapping bombs to them. I'm sure everyone involved had a fantastic time. Here's the kicker. It actually worked. Sort of. During testing, the bats did exactly what they were supposed to do. They roosted in nearby buildings after being released. The problem? They roosted in the Carlsbad Air Base buildings, including barracks, offices, and airplane hangars. The base's control tower caught fire. Mission accomplished, just not the mission they intended. Despite this successful test, the project was abandoned. Turns out bats don't follow orders as well as human pilots, and the military decided that weaponized cartoon chaos wasn't the direction they wanted to take the war. From bent barrel guns to bombs on wheels to explosive bats, World War II proved that desperation makes people try the stupidest things imaginable. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and comment.